Think Outside the Lines is a space for anyone ready to stop checking boxes, to step off autopilot, and create the life you actually want, with clarity, intention, and alignment. Whether you're questioning the default path, rebuilding from scratch, or just looking to feel a little more like yourself. My guest today left their job just weeks ago, the most money they'd ever made. And they left it not because they had something better lined up, but because the cost of staying had become more than the risk of leaving. In this conversation, we talk about what it actually feels like to step away from the script when you don't have a safety net, what they're building on the other side, and whether the bet is going to pay off. They don't know yet. And that honesty is what makes this a conversation worth having. Join me as we think outside the lines with Taylor Apolonio. All right, Taylor, so you left your job just weeks ago, the most money you'd ever made, to turn your side hustle into a full-time business. And I guess I would just start by asking, how are you doing? And what does it feel like to be in that uncertainty right now, this fresh into things?
Yeah, every day is different. It's a bit of a roller coaster, I would say. I'm enjoying being in my creative zone and kind of being able to use the autonomy and freedom I have from not, looking to a corporation for my income. And other days it's like, oh yeah, well, I'm fully responsible for getting my income now, and that's very daunting. And when is my next client going to get? So it's a bit of a roller coaster,
Yeah, for sure. I love that you use the word daunting and not scary, because as you're speaking about it, scary is always word that comes to mind for me when I hear other people describe it, because I know that feeling of the uncertainty of things, right? But then if you think about like life is uncertain, so where are we going to take those risks, right?
Right. I think that there's so much uncertainty happening right now that I'm like, okay, just all my chips are in, my cards are out on the table. Let's do it.
Definitely. So now you have a graduate degree in workplace psychology. You literally have the knowledge and the tools to help businesses create healthier systems. What was it like to have expertise and still not be able to navigate a toxic workplace yourself? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, this is a big topic. I think that I went to get this degree because I really care about people and I care about systems and helping people navigate systems better and having systems support people more as well. And so I get into this role and I'm ready to get my hands messy and do the work that I'm excited to do. And it's like, oh yeah, there's a lot of power structures here and power dynamics. And maybe I have some good ideas, but maybe I don't know how to present them in a way that's compelling for folks, even though I think that the most compelling argument is always like, this will be better for humans. And that's not always what's actually very convincing, unfortunately.
Isn't that crazy?
Right. And yeah, so I'm in this workplace and I find that I'm asking questions that I think that are, good questions to be asking, like, why are we approaching things this way? What could we be doing better? Like, how can we better support people? And those were not okay questions to ask, it seemed, because I started receiving a lot of backlash. And that's a hard place to be in when I feel like my heart's in the right place and I have the knowledge and skill set to be able to better support people and systems. And I'm just being dealt a hard hand of trying to let's see. I feel like I'm being pushed out and excluded myself.
What I'm most fascinated about here is that and I'm thinking about this in real time, kind of like going off script a little bit, but I feel like there was a moment, and I feel like it was like around COVID, maybe coming out of COVID, where like what you're suggesting was actually being encouraged by a lot of companies. Right. So like that, let's be more like people focused and, talk about like diversity and inclusion and those sort of things. Right. And then it seems like as of the late, there's been like a significant backlash to some of that, it's really, really fascinating.
Yeah, I think that there is like a lot of expecting for people to be compliant. And I don't think that people are wanting to be compliant right now. Like, I surely don't feel like I want to be compliant to like things that I don't feel well.
I guess what I'm saying is like, once you take that genie out of the bottle, right, and you show people that there can be freedom and there can be, autonomy and you're allowed to express your opinions and your thoughts and your feelings, and even though it's quote unquote the workplace, right, you're still allowed to do that. And then to say, no, just kidding. We don't really want that.
Right. And I think that like part of the answer right now for big corporations doing that is like, well, we'll just figure out a way to like push AI in to do these things instead if you're not on board. And it's like, oh, okay, let's see how long that works. Because
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's so many separate podcasts we could do about AI specifically in
totally.
this scenario, right? Because I think that the most fascinating thing about AI to me is that it's literally going to take all of the friction away in terms of like what you're describing, right? So when there's no people that are there to actually, push back or have thoughts and feelings about things, corporations are going to love that even more. But that's kind of another conversation.
Totally.
I do think a lot of people that are in the corporate world currently and maybe were previously can relate to a lot of this conversation, which is why I think it's really important. One of the things that you'd mentioned to me previously is that in your 6-month performance review, you had like, top marks across the board. And then a year later it was lackluster. And you seemingly didn't really alter your behavior that much during that time. What do you think it is that happened in between that?
Yeah. Part of my frustration is that I wasn't really told directly what changes were being seen. However, I think that part of it was just I had new ideas. I was working in higher education, which traditionally, like, people stay in higher ed forever, and kind of there's a lot of status quo happening in higher ed. And
which is fascinating unto itself.
I completely
Right.
agree. Yes. Because, yeah, you think that's a place of learning and growth and like expansion.
Yeah.
And when you're inside it, very much not that. But yeah, and so I think that maybe I threatened the status quo in some ways, and that's where the negative performance review came from. And it was very interesting to kind of go from like, okay, where was the feedback of like me like declining in performance? Because there really wasn't any, because I think that it was happening in rooms that I wasn't in necessarily.
Yeah. So again, I think this is something that a lot of people can really relate to. The idea of power dynamics and emotions, right? That those in power, there's logic in their systems and just people at large, right? Can you give an example, like in your situation, of what that power dynamic looked like and what you were specifically fighting against?
Yeah, sure. I think that we as humans, and especially like in America, that we like to say, yeah, we're super like logical and like data driven, and we really care about the science behind things. But I think that, yes, those things are important, but I think that we're pretty emotional beings. And so I think that even when I was coming in with a skill set that was kind of, data driven and science backed and things that I've learned through my education, I think because it threatened the status quo and the power dynamics of, these people that have been in these positions for 30 plus years, it was since it threatened them, I think that it was an emotional response of like, whoa, we don't know how to deal with Taylor. Let's kind of separate them out from what we're doing. And yeah, I think that it can be scary to give people power when you're used to having power. And I think that specifically, I've had a lot of issues working with white women. I think the proximity to power they have is kind of a weapon sometimes. And I find identity-related power dynamics extremely interesting.
What specifically do you think it was that threatened people in power? What was that power struggle about, if you could dive a little deeper into that?
Sure. I mean, so I am a non-binary person. I use they, them pronouns, and I don't think that at this university that was like a super revolutionary idea. However, I think that I worked with a lot of older folks who, again, had been at the university for 30 plus years. And so I think that maybe their own personal comfortability wasn't there. I have no idea if that had anything to do with things or not, but sometimes people wouldn't use my correct pronouns. And so since I didn't really get a lot of feedback on here are the behaviors that we wish you would stop doing or do more of, it feels like a natural place for my brain to kind of like wander to. It's like, is my gender at play here? Am I being perceived in ways that maybe are aligned with how I think that I'm showing up?
Yeah. I mean, based on like what you're describing, it sounds almost like just your strong will
Right.
And your personality probably played a stronger role in that, but that's just a hunch. So let's talk a little bit about your decision to leave, because you didn't leave that job for another job, right? You left to try to support yourself with a side hustle. What made you willing to take that risk despite the uncertainty?
Yeah, I think that this kind of dovetails with what you were saying about me being strong-willed. I think that I was pretty forward in calling out the dynamics of like, hey, this one person specifically seems to have an issue with me and she's not willing to talk about it. Do you think that you could help facilitate something? Do you think that there's something that we can do to make this better? And what ended up happening was like half of my job responsibilities were given to someone else, so I didn't have to interact with this person at all. And so, yeah, I think that me being very forward and asking lots of questions and trying to understand what was going on, and then just like not feeling satisfied with answers or solutions that were coming up. I use pretty much every single resource at my disposal at the university to try and like facilitate, like, this person won't even talk to me. So like, what ways can I go around to just like get a conversation so I can get to the point of understanding what's happening here? Nothing got to that point. She just quite literally like ignored me and kept doing her job, which is fine until, you know, some things started getting missed because there was just not transparent communication. So yeah, I think that after kind of like 6 months of like being very diligent and trying to, I was really frustrated. And so I think that I just got to the point where I was like, okay, like, it's great that I have health insurance and a paycheck coming in. And also like when I'm outside of work, I'm consumed with like trying to figure out what the hell is going on here. And that just doesn't seem worth it.
Yeah. And that sort of leads into my next question, I guess. But like, before I get to that, I am fascinated by, so like I have the corporations that I've worked for, I've noticed that the more successful teams that I've worked on were teams where I was either allowed to, or there was already a culture of really strong like feedback. And it sounds to me like that was not the culture at all where you were. And I think that's something that's like really important to speak to, because if more cultures had instilled, you know, a feedback structure, a feedback culture, I do think that they would just be more successful by default, right? Because what you're suggesting is that you didn't really have a place to go, or you didn't really feel comfortable giving people feedback or even soliciting feedback, right? It was kind of like you're just in the dark with everything. And I think that's where so many corporate cultures specifically go wrong. Am I correct in that assumption? And have you worked anywhere where you had kind of like that feedback structure in place that maybe things were better?
Yeah, this is fascinating. One of my projects in my master's program was all about feedback. And I think that you're totally spot on. And this is where a lot of unraveling happens with teams.
Yeah.
It's tricky because, again, like I think that we're very emotionally driven people in general, even if we say that we're not. And feedback is one of those things that like there's a lot of emotion and feelings and like things happening inside your body when, you know, if I have to give you some hard feedback, Sean, like, are you going to be feeling it in your body? Like, I know I'm going to be feeling it as the giver, right?
Well, I just think that, yes, everything you just said is accurate, but I also think that that's why there's training for feedback, right? So like if you have an organization that is healthy, that is doing feedback-based training, you teach people not only how to deliver feedback, which is critical, but I think more importantly, how to receive feedback, right? Because it's with the understanding that both sides have to assume positive intent, right? I think that's the most important thing about feedback is that, you know, if you do come to me and you say, hey, Sean, like I've got, you know, this feedback for you, or however you are taught to phrase it, there could be a moment where I'm maybe not willing to receive that feedback, right? And that means that right now is not the best time. So it's almost like asking for permission, right? Like there's a whole structure with which you should instill a feedback culture. And I think, to your point, a lot of people hear that word and they immediately go to where you're like, oh, my body tenses up and I don't want to receive this and it's going to be bad news or whatever. When actually, no, it's meant to be constructive and actually help us, navigate things a little more effectively.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that like intent is a big thing, but I think to assume someone has good intent. There has to be like a foundational relationship happening. And
1000%.
yeah, if there's not, like with my direct supervisor, we didn't really have that. Yeah, we didn't have that established. And so it was hard to assume that. And I think that, I think in social justice spaces, we talk a lot about like intent versus impact. And I think that we can really talk about impact or intent, but until we also realize like this is impactful on someone as well, and knowing like what does that look like for someone, then I think that's part of the conversation too.
Definitely. So a moment ago, you did kind of allude to the moment where you felt like you had to leave, but it sounds to me like there was also like a gradual kind of, ease into that. I think that for most people, it is gradual, and then it almost starts to feel kind of like a prison that you're trapped in, and then you're trapped, right? And once you're trapped, it's impossible for some people to get out. How did you personally navigate that? And what did those final kind of weeks and days look like for you?
Let's see. I did a lot of dissociation at work, I would say. And I think that's
most people's every day, sadly, but yes.
Yeah. See, and that's hard for me because like I really care about work and workplaces. That's why I got a whole degree in it. And I really I'm going to like phrase it very past tense. I took a lot of pride in like how I approach work. And so that was like a really hard thing for me to be like, I'm dissociating all the time and I don't want to be. I want to be doing things that are productive here. And I was not productive because it wasn't encouraged. It wasn't rewarded for me to be productive. It was very much ignored and discouraged. And, the underlying message of all of the indirect feedback I was getting was like, do less. Like, we don't like what you're doing, do less.
So I think what I'm hearing you talk about, and I think this is actually something that's really big and really important for a lot of people listening, is that you didn't feel like you were being valued, I think is kind of what it comes down to, right? And please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of, I think, what I'm hearing you say. And I think that there's so much importance in caring that you are bringing value to the table, right? Because I think a lot of people, especially in like a dead-end corporate job or whatever, they stop caring, and that's why they're so unhappy. And that's why, I think more importantly, there's no motivation for them to leave and find something where they will feel valued, where they will be valued, right? It feels to me like that's kind of what you're saying. If I'm right, can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, very much here in America. I think that we get a lot of value from our workplaces, and I don't think that that is typical everywhere you go. But it's something that definitely like rang very true for me for a long time. I was raised by a business owner, and so like I definitely had like this very tight hold onto like my identity as work for a long time when I worked for my dad, and like going throughout the rest of life. I think that was like a very, I don't know, it's just a pillar of my identity.
Instilled,
yeah. And so, when something that, whether it's like your work identity or your gender or your race or whatever, when like your identity is threatened or questioned in some way, like it's really easy to take that personal. And I think that, we care a lot about the like cultures that our identities are kind of associated with.
Yeah. One of the things that you said that kind of struck me is that you talked about like you hope your story shows people that they're allowed to lower the stakes a bit in their own lives. What does lowering the stakes mean to you, and why is that important?
This is hard. I think for me, there is like this looming pressure over my head a lot of times of like, you're supposed to perform this way. You're supposed to get to these expectations.
Who do you think instilled that pressure? Sorry to interrupt you.
I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, in a very like religious conservative, culture. And there's very much a like right and a wrong and like a timeline. You're supposed to, after you go to high school, you go on a mission, you come home and you get married and you have babies and la-di-da-di-da.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really just a product of me living in that kind of culture and that society.
Lowering the stakes. Let's get back to that because I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah, I think lowering the stakes, for me at least, kind of allows me to be playful and creative and explore things that maybe aren't logical paths forward, or I don't know. I think that there's a lot of magic that we all hold inside of us, and I think that it's hard to access it when it's like, oh, well, Q1, we're supposed to hit this. And you know, oh, I'm approaching 30. Where's my husband, or whatever the case is, you know?
Yeah.
We put ourselves in boxes and we put each other in boxes. And I think when we're able to let go of those, that's where a lot of like interesting things lie.
So lowering the stakes almost is like kind of resetting expectations based on your own lens.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. I want to talk about what you're building. Now, you're blending interior design and behavioral psychology to help people create homes that support their well-being. How did you land at that specific intersection?
Yeah, so my very first degree was in interior design. And I was always interested in business and psychology, and that's why I kind of went down into the workplace psychology route. And when I was going to get my interior design degree, I stumbled upon this course that I was like, this sounds exactly like what I want to do. It's called design psychology. And I had a really lovely instructor who's like one of a few design psychologists in the world. And she really opened up my eyes to like, oh my God, like I didn't know these worlds could blend. And like, this is so fascinating. And I was like, how do I get a job in this? And she was like, well, there's not a lot of pathways here. You kind of have to make it up as you go. And I was like, okay, I can try that, I think. So yeah, I think that we talk a lot about kind of the different ways that our psychology is affected by different things. And I don't think it's very intuitive to know like the built environment has an impact on us. I grew up as a very like sensitive child person. I still am. And so I always notice like, oh, I don't feel good when I'm at a hospital. There's like weird sterile things happening and I don't really like this. Or if I like went into a specific restaurant, I'd be like, oh, the vibes in here, yes, they're immaculate. Like I feel fantastic. And I don't know if like that's typical for most people or not.
You just described me, so yes, I'm right there with you. Like the restaurant can have the best food in the world, but the vibes are off, or like the atmosphere is not what I need, and I'm like, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that, you know, both hospitals and restaurants and commercial everything, they use specific psychological tactics to influence you in certain ways. Like a lot of fast food restaurants use a lot of the color red, and that's because it like encourages you to be hungry. Like that's a psychological thing. And so instead of like using design psychology in like a manipulative way for you to like purchase more things or to eat at this restaurant, I'm wanting to bring it into people's homes where it's like, okay, we can encourage like, you know, more connection and more like, you know, gathering around a table and talking and like creating this space that actually is good for you and your well-being, reduces stress and kind of that sort of thing.
I love this so much. How does it like differ or compare to like feng shui? Like, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I think that's what most people like. That's where my mind defaults to as you speak about this. But I feel like it's maybe a lot deeper than that, and more intentional even.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure how to say it. I always say feng shui, but I'm
feng
not
shui,
sure if
yeah, I think
there's
that's it.
a correct
I think
way.
you're right.
I actually took feng shui in design school as well, and
Okay.
they share some similar principles, I would say. But yeah, I think the psychology route is a lot more backed in science. I haven't dove like super deep into feng shui, and so maybe there is science there that I'm just unaware of. But yeah, it's more just like taking very general like psychology aspects into design rather than kind of, I think it's a little more vibes based from my understanding of feng shui, but
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay. I like it. Another thing you said that kind of struck me was that you said that hyper consumerism has failed our reward system. So what do you mean by that?
Where do I begin with this? I have a hard time being a consumer, I think. I don't know. I keep bringing up like us in America, but I feel like there is a specific like American consumerism thing.
Oh, 100%.
And yeah, I think that we reward consumerism online a lot. Like that is a lot of content. And I don't think that that's actually rewarding for people in real life very often. Like I would much rather someone buy like bedding or dishes or something that's like really quality and is going to last them for a long time and that they can love, and not just get like whatever TikTok shop suggested for them and then it
Yeah.
breaks in 6 months and it's like, okay, let's start over again. That doesn't feel like a very grounding or sustainable way to live.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I am totally with you. I think consumerism, and I would agree that especially in America, has like just destroyed our society to a large extent. But it's so fascinating to me at the same time, right? And I think that's like the paradox, because I have a fragrance addiction. So that's kind of like my vice, right? Where I'm like constantly spending all this money on fragrances that I don't need. And I'll scroll through and I'm like, oh my God, I need this one. And I don't, right? There's nothing new that it's actually going to offer me. But then there's that is very like closely related to luxury goods, and then you start following these influencers that have all this shit, for lack of a better word, right? That they obviously don't need. It's not enhancing their life. And so I think that it's such a dangerous, like social media, and this is like part of my next question for you, but like social media has just like screwed our society up so badly. And I think sometimes we think that it's just like politics or, what like specific areas of social media. No, it's everything, right? Because yes, it's altered significantly our political landscape in this country particularly, but the consumerism aspect of it is like, I don't even think you realize it sometimes. You're just scrolling and there's an ad for something that you absolutely don't need, but you do, right? It's crazy. I guess one of the things I'm fascinated with you is that you are avoiding social media as building your business, which I need to know in 2026, when everyone says that you have to be online to build a business and succeed, why are you choosing not to? And how is that going?
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons why I am wanting to work for myself is because I can control the values and I know that I can be aligned with how I want to move through the world. And how I want to move through the world does not include social media, or very little social media at least.
I love this for you.
And yeah, I think that a lot of the reason why people are on social media is because they think that's where everything is and we are supposed to be there. I don't know if the average person actually feels like they have a lot of value tied into their social media or not. But to me, the whole idea of social media is like connection, and I don't feel connected on social media. So like I want to find connection in other places. And if I do feel some connection, there's only certain places in social media where I actually feel like deep connection. Like YouTube, I like YouTube, but that's because like I can form a deeper understanding of someone. And so, yeah, I think that at least in my business, I'm not really looking for like those surface level, like, yeah, buy this for $2.99 and be on your way kind of a thing. Like I'm trying to create relationships with people that I work with. And so it just doesn't seem very values aligned for me and what I'm wanting to do with my business.
I mean, I actually love all of that. I think the irony of what you were talking about, like social media, like the words social is in it, right? So it was originally intended to be social, make us more social. And I do feel like it's, to your point, is kind of done the opposite. There's really nothing social about social media anymore, right? Like maybe like on Instagram, you're, sending memes or something to friends, and that's, I guess, social. But beyond that, like, I don't know what value there is. And so I'm really fascinated by, someone like yourself who sees it from that perspective. And I think a lot of us do, but just people don't really know how to articulate it. So good for you. Keep me posted on how that works out for you. I think a question that could help a lot of people in your situation: how are you showing up for yourself right now? Like, as you execute this venture where there's still uncertainty, don't know what the financial aspect of things is going to look like. How are you showing up for yourself? Whether it's self-care, whether it's, the intention behind certain actions.
I think that in a way, like how I'm wanting to approach business is an act of taking care of myself, of like really going back and like, is this values aligned? Is this what I'm wanting to do? I'm like constantly checking in on myself. I'm like, is this the path forward? And does this actually make sense? So in a way, I feel like I'm doing it a lot. And in another way, I'm like, oh yeah, am I kind of separating myself from the business enough to be able to take care of myself otherwise as well? And I think that I am. I'm being very intentional around like less screen time. I'm really enjoying like trying new recipes. I have not always been a great cook, but in the last couple of years, that's been like something that I have like really put a lot of effort to, is like, how does one actually cook and make it good and not go to restaurants all the time? Especially here in DC, it's like you go out to a restaurant and you're dropping like $35 on something that's just, insane. But so I think cooking is a good outlet for me. And also I've gone into like physical like games recently. My partner and I, we play like Mancala all the time. And yeah, I think just trying to find new ways to like not being in front of a screen, whether that's like reading a book and going to book club. I think just having like more tactile things in my life is like something that I've been craving and been enjoying.
I'm hearing presence,
Yes.
which I love, right? I think we could all use more of that. And the screen time thing is so big. I talk a lot about that, and I'm not always as good at it as I want to be, but yeah, it's something that we just need to be paying more attention to in general, I think, as a society. So the idea that comfort and convenience are kind of always what to strive for, that's something that you said you've had to unlearn. What changed your mind about that?
There's so much wrapped up in this question. I think that it's easy to identify as this is the path of least resistance, and that is the path that I will go down. And I don't know if I have found many satisfying ends to that path, whether it's like relationally or work or anything really. Like I can point to many relationships I've been in the past. I'm like, yeah, the path of least resistance was staying in that relationship, and it was not a good relationship, and there were a lot of really not good things that have happened, and maybe we shouldn't be doing that again because I don't want to have uncomfortable conversations. But I think where this probably really took root for me, I got more involved in social justice spaces, and I now see like comfort as like very tied to like white supremacy, and just kind of like comfort can be again like manipulated into ways of just like not questioning status quo, I think. And so I think just kind of getting more comfortable being uncomfortable is something that has allowed me to kind of like explore my inner world more, but also like be better connected to things outside of myself because I'm asking deeper questions and wanting to like really dig deep into things.
Wow, that's such a big conversation, right? Especially some of the stuff that you alluded to, which I love and I could talk about all day. So that's kind of the through line with people who aspire toward entrepreneurship, right? It's the not wanting to play inside of a box, not wanting to stay inside of a comfort zone. And I'm so fascinated by, there's no right answer to this question, so don't feel pressure, but like, what do you think that that's just innate in some people? Or is it born of just this hatred for being comfortable? Like, where do you think that drive stems from? And if someone is, and I'm thinking about someone right now that maybe is like super unhappy in their job or super comfortable and complacent, right? How do we help them get to the other side where you and I are?
Ooh. Yeah, I think that it's a personal journey. I think that sometimes people have to stay very comfortable in bad positions for long enough to kind of desire that for themselves.
Like a breaking point.
Yeah, I think that for someone like me, I don't like to stay in that discomfort for very long of like, this doesn't feel aligned. That's hard for me to just like sit and accept and continue doing the good work kind of a thing. But yeah, I think that for other people, like, you know, if a Black woman is stuck in this position, I don't know if I'm going to be like, yeah, you like, she already deals enough with things that like I can't even fully comprehend on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And so like, it's probably not my place to be like, yeah, let's encourage you to do this. It's like, well, we all have like different pros and cons and factors that we have to consider. And when like you're ready to take that step, then like I'll be here to support you in it. And I think that that's fantastic, but it's a risk reward situation.
Yeah. So there's a specific word that you mentioned in there that is something that really resonates with me. It's something that I talk about a lot in my coaching and also in in these conversations. And that word is alignment. And from my perspective, I think that when you are like, the example you use where you're kind of helping someone navigate or, coaching someone that is maybe in a less fortunate position than you, where you're in a completely different set of shoes, right? And I'm not going to make the decision for you to quit your job, right? That doesn't feel like something that I even have business or jurisdiction over. But what I can do is I can help you figure out how to find alignment. And so that is kind of like a through line in my work. And I love that you mentioned that word because I think that that's where you can start. I think that if you're feeling hopeless or if you're, feeling lost, what brings you back to alignment? And that is different for everyone. Right. And so I think that I really love that you use that word because it's such an important word to me. And it's such an important through line, I think, in our lives that most of us don't stop and actually reflect on.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there's a definite like values thing here for people, which again, like might generally be the same among people, but could be vastly different as well. And so I think it's really like getting in touch with yourself is where like you'll find those answers. And I think that, because of consumerism and like all these different things at play, like I think that in a way, a lot of these things that have we've been talking about today are ways to like avoid or distract ourselves from like actually knowing ourselves and uncovering like, what does that alignment look like?
That's why I have these conversations. So I think going back to getting more comfortable being uncomfortable, what does that actually look like for you day to day? Or if you have any examples of ways that maybe might help other people?
Yeah, I mean, I think that exploring this business is definitely like something that's uncomfortable for me, but I've talked a little bit about like different social justice things through our conversation as well. And I think that, someone who grew up in a very religious, conservative area of the world where I didn't feel a lot of alignment and encouragement to, know myself better and kind of was encouraged to, be like the status quo for that particular area. I think that social justice is a new space for me that I get to engage in like, okay, yeah, what's happening with my different identities? How is that related to power for myself? How am I relating to others that are in power? And kind of exploring and interrogating what those dynamics are doing.
I'd love to like have that conversation with you separately because I just feel like that's such an important topic right now, especially like literally right now, like in 2026 in the United States, you know what I mean? So I love where you're going with all of that. What is a belief that you've held about how life is supposed to work that you've had to let go of?
I think that going back to like growing up in Salt Lake City, Utah.
I love it. That question's funny. I've never had anyone laugh at that question, but I love it.
I think that there's a lot in my story that's rooted in being brought up in a Mormon culture. I wasn't raised to be LDS, but like it was everywhere growing up. And so I think that, like I remember being a very young child and being like, Dad, I'm going to get married when I'm 20. And because that's the typical age of, Mormon people to get married. And he's like, how about 25? Like, that sounds like a good, good way to go. And I was like, okay, let's split the difference, 23. And he's like, okay, fine, 23. And I really like held on to that for a really long time. And the like relationship that I was in my early 20s, I was trying to like really cram that into this like idea, like, okay, 23 is when I'll get married. And then, we'll wait a couple of years until we have kids. And then like I had this whole like very rigid schedule of what my life was supposed to be. And I was just trying to cram this relationship into this idea. And it sounds like I realize now like so silly, but it was like a very real thing for me. And I got out of that relationship and I was like, I don't know, 24 or something. And I was like, oh my God, if I would have like gone through with that plan, like I would have been fucking exhausted and like pissed off all the time because that's not a good situation for me to be in. And anyway, so I think that's why it's funny to me is because it seems so insignificant. and like silly to be like, well, Taylor, why did you have those mental barriers up? And it's just because, yeah, that was the culture I grew up in, and it was very strongly being present in my mind, I guess.
It's societal pressures and all of that. It's just so fascinating to me, like what time and wisdom and experience can do for us. Right. Because like I'm with you. Like I even in relationships in my 30s where I thought, oh yeah, this is definitely time, right, to completely settle down or whatever. It's like, oh my God, like no, right? Like it's so fascinating to me when you become enlightened in that sense. And I'm not pretending to be enlightened, but it's like time and wisdom are just so fascinating to me. And I love hearing other people's stories in that realm because it's, I don't know, we're all the same. Unprecedented times. What feels unprecedented to you right now, and how are you making sense of it? I know you mentioned social justice a little bit. Maybe you want to elaborate on that. Maybe there's something else.
I have a difficult time answering this because in one sense, I'm like, well, there's a lot of things repeating right now. There are like for sure things that are unprecedented happening, and it's really scary. And like to put my like social justice lens on, I'm like, well, also there are many people in different communities and identities that are like, well, things like this have actually happened and have been happening. And just now it's affecting more people.
You're just now becoming, wise to it. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I have a hard time answering this. I think one thing that for sure is unprecedented is AI. And, we talked about like AI could be a topic interwoven into like everything these days and could go off in a million directions. And I think one thing that I'm very curious to see happen with AI is I'm hoping that soon there's going to be a pendulum swing for corporations and organizations realizing like, oh shit, we actually really value people working in our organizations, and we actually need them a lot more than we thought we did, and we need to value them better. And I'm curious to see how that changes the workplace landscape in the next 5 or 10 years, because I'm predicting and hoping that there is a big swing to, being better for employees.
So fascinating that you say that. I want to be as optimistic as you are, but I personally don't see it going in that direction. Again, totally another podcast episode. It's a fascinating conversation to me. I just think that it's happening too fast. And I think that that's the thing that scares me about AI, particularly as it pertains to the workplace, is that it's happening so fast. The people I know who are not paying attention, and it's most people in my life, candidly, don't even see it coming. Or are completely like, well, it's not going to affect my job. Like I'm in HR. I need to, I deal with people. It's not going to affect my job. And I'm like, actually, you're going to be one of the first. And so like, but I want to share your optimism, because I think what you're getting at is that, it kind of comes back to like the social media thing, how that backfired, right? It's like connection, interconnectivity. What are we doing on this planet if not to, be connected to each other as human beings? And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And I think that regardless of how fast the AI stuff happens to us, that is hopefully what we come back to as humans. And I don't know if that means we rally together and fight back, or, just humanity's done. I don't know. But I think there's a really fascinating conversation somewhere in there that we need to be having more of. So I appreciate you, making that suggestion. If someone is listening to this right now and they're in kind of a similar situation to you, maybe they're stuck in a workplace that doesn't align with their values, but they're afraid to, or they, scared to, or whatever, leave, what would you want them to know?
Oh, this is hard. I felt like I was able to leave because my finances were in order for me to leave. And that's why I was able to make the decisions that I did. I think that our financial power is... I hate saying that like money leads to more options, because I know that money can be so tight for people. But I also think that because corporations, organizations, etc., value money so much, I think that we can take a lesson in that playbook of like, okay, how can I gain more financial freedom and power to be able to allow myself to make more decisions? And I don't know if I have like great advice with that, but I think that that is something that I'm very grateful for, that I was able to save and kind of allow myself to take this leap of faith with my own business because I had the financial means to do that. And yeah, I think that financial power is something that doesn't get talked enough on like an individual basis.
So thank you for that really honest answer, because I don't think that that is a answer that most people would give, right? They would try to instill some wisdom or something. And I think that you did in your own way. And I think that that's so beautiful. So thank you so much for that honesty, because you're absolutely right. Not everybody is financially able to take these sort of risks. And I think that's like the one thing that nobody talks enough about. So thank you for that answer. I guess kind of in that realm, looking back at your decision to leave, even though it's still fresh, what indications are helping you trust that you did make the right call?
I've been getting so much energy and creativity from like exploring new things. And I think that that feeling in general of just like, oh, I can like, yeah, access these things a lot more easily than I could 6 months ago is really encouraging for me.
I love that. And, this has been a fun conversation actually, because I feel like we went in some directions that I wasn't necessarily expecting to. And I'm always appreciative when that happens, because life and humanity is it's so much bigger than I think sometimes we try to make it be. So I'm really grateful to you for this conversation. I want to say thank you so much. And I'm also really excited for your journey. I think that people listening probably will be too, because I feel like you're going to do amazing things and have amazing success. And so good luck to you. And I'm really excited. Please tell people listening how they can connect with you and learn more about your work.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And my business is called Habitat Interiors Co. You can find me on LinkedIn as one of the only social medias I still have, and I guess YouTube as well. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Thanks for spending some time with me today. Choosing to step off autopilot and think differently about your life takes work, and I don't take it lightly that you're here. If today's episode resonated, the best way to support the show is to share it with someone who might need to hear it. And whenever you're ready to go deeper, whether through free worksheets, guided audio reflections, or one-on-one coaching, you can find everything over at thinkoutsideThelines.com. Be well, and I'll catch you next time.